The Chancellor finally delivers her budget. You can watch it 12:15 today on ITV, expecting to announce a new levy on the most expensive homes in her budget, a mansion tax. The Green Party wants to go far further. They want it to be far more Labour.
Leader Zack Polanski wants to tax the richest people's wealth, saying it would raise £14.8 billion a year. So should we tax the rich more?
Well, Zack Polanski is here to make the case for the Green Party, saying go much further on those with the broadest shoulders. The former Conservative Minister, Sir John Redwood, says that would be chaos. It would mean the wealthiest simply move abroad. So welcome to you both. Zack Polanski, as I said, you're surging in the polls. You have a very grabby way of talking to people. And in fact, you've improved the finances of your own party because you've got many, many more membership fees through what you're saying. So outline the case for us this morning. We have a Labour Chancellor, but she doesn't seem to be hugely taxing the very rich.
Well, that's right. People are tired and exhausted in this country. Their wages aren't going up, but food prices are. And we keep hearing conversations about tough choices. But these always seem to be tough choices for children in poverty, for disabled people, for working class communities. When are we going to see tough choices for multimillionaires and billionaires? Now, it's really important to talk about, I'm talking about the 1%, people with extraordinary amounts of wealth. I'm not talking about plumbers or hairdressers or people running small businesses.
Some plumbers have become very wealthy.
Well, I'm talking about assets of £10 million or more. If a plumber's got there,
I was
then
thinking
I'm
of
sure
Charlie Mullins, who runs Pimlico Plumbers.
Well, quite. And so then we should be asking for 1% on £10 million or more, or 2% on £1 billion or more. Now, before I criticise the Labour government too much, I do want to say that it sounds like they're going to scrap the two-child benefit cap. That's something the Green Party, and many campaigners have been calling for. It is outrageous, though, that it's taken a Labour government over 18 months to finally lift hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty. Now, I would say we've shamed them into that position. I'll shame them into every single position if we have to.
So Nigel Farage. I think this is something you and Nigel Farage agree on.
Well, if he gets the right position on something, fine, but we know that he doesn't really believe in anything other than protecting Nigel Farage. What you get in the Green Party, and thanks for the introduction, because I'll always welcome new members, I'll always welcome new donations, and in fact, since I became leader 2 months ago, we've had over 100,000 new members, and I think the reason for that is because people who used to vote Labour are looking at this Labour Party and going, they're literally protecting the super rich.
Right, so they're going to lift, we understand, the two-child cap on getting extra benefits from the government if you claim universal credit. Shouldn't that be paid for by potentially a bigger tax on those with the biggest incomes or the biggest assets, John?
Well, all parties in this country agree that people on low incomes and no incomes receive benefit support. And we all agree that you can only actually tax the better off or the rich. And that's what we all do. And the argument is about how far can you go before the rich say, I'm not paying. And I think we are at that point. We had 16,000 millionaires leave over this Labour government so far, probably more by now. And we see billionaires pulling out who make really big contributions to tax. Mittal, a former Labour donor, supporter of Blair and Mr Balls here, has now decided this is not a place to keep his assets anymore.
He's gone to Switzerland.
So I'm afraid it's a totally unreal world that there are these rich people who will stay and pay, and you can't give them tough choices. They've got houses elsewhere, they've got a private jet on the runway waiting to go. If you make it too uncomfortable, they just say, well, I can't be bothered with you.
You could raise a little, couldn't you, John? I mean, you could. The Chancellor is going to have a mansion tax on the biggest properties. George Osborne actually advocated that. You could do something. The thing which Zack is saying is £14.9 billion every year. Is that realistic?
No, it's totally unrealistic. I mean, it's the magic money tree world, isn't it? And it's the silly slogan world. You try governing and you'll find you can't do that. You take over a council and you find you can't suddenly do all the things.
Well, let's begin with, we keep hearing the name of this billionaire, and that's because it's one exceptional circumstance where someone's left the country. Actually, all evidence has pretty much been debunked. And it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what it is to be wealthy. If you're poor, you need to make decisions based on finances because you're poor. If you're very wealthy, the idea that you would leave this country because someone's asking you to pay 1% on your wealth is beyond absurd. We should be more patriotic than that. People invest in this country and live in this country because they love this country, hopefully. They want to help pay for public services. They want to make sure that they're part of the arts and culture, that they love their neighbours. If people want to flee because we're asking for a tiny amount of money relatively to their wealth, then I think we should wave them off out the door.
Well,
I think we should actually care
1%
about
a
the
year
nurses, the
is
teachers,
not a
the
tiny
doctors.
amount, and they do move. You can see it happening.
But you're
It's
saying
already
1%
happening.
is not a tiny
Quite a lot
amount.
of some of the best industrialists in Britain have left this country already because they see no reason to give excess money to the government, and they now think the situation for industry is so hostile as a result of taxes on business and high energy prices and the refusal of your party and others to even get our own oil and gas out of the ground because you want to systematically destroy British industry and petrochemicals, and you have this absurd idea that it's a good thing to import instead, which even puts world CO2 up. So you are the problem.
Well, this sounds like, won't someone please think about the billionaires? Also, we have a climate and nature crisis. And actually, if we
Which
weren't
you're making worse with those policies.
If we weren't giving £3.2 billion to fossil fuels, those are those big oil and gas companies, in fossil fuel subsidies, we could actually spend that money on a jobs guarantee, making sure that those workers are at the heart of investing in renewable energy.
Well, what's the point of
Renewable
a jobs
energy-
guarantee when you're shutting the refineries and you're shutting the ethylene plants?
Because I'm
and the
talking about
olefins
renewable
plants?
energy, which is more secure,
Yeah,
more
and you make
popular,
all that in China.
and cheaper.
Just to go back to this...
Well, it wouldn't be in China if we were
Well,
investing in this
all
country.
the solar farms that are being put in, they're Chinese solar
Just to go back to the
panels.
wealth
It's helping
tax.
Well, let's make
Chinese
sure that we
industry,
create them.
And they burn coal to make them. How does
Well,
that
let's
work?
make sure we manufacture in Britain. You're creating a completely false argument that isn't
Back to
my
the
argument.
wealth
Well, we're
tax.
not, because
But-
your policy doesn't work. We're deindustrialising. Don't you understand that?
But I'm
This is
literally
really
talking
serious.
about an
You're
industrial-
driving people out of work.
You're not even here, Ed, at
Back
this
to
point.
the,
You need to invest in an industrial strategy
I know, but we're
by
supposed to be
taking the
talking-
money away from the fossil fuel companies and putting it into the renewable
Back to the wealth tax
Yes,
for a
Ed.
second. I think that economists who've looked at this say you can do a big wealth tax if it's a surprise and you do it once. But if you try and do it every year, then what then happens is people change their behaviour, they move their assets, and you don't raise any money. And you're saying you can do this every year.
Well, it's not so
realistic.
easy to move an asset. So if we look at the Duke of Westminster, he owns half of Mayfair. You can't just pick up Mayfair and move with it. I also think when we talk about economists, it's important to say that economists are often not just independent minds. They often are donated to by the same multimillionaires and billionaires, or they are protecting the same power and wealth. And I
Institute
think-
for Fiscal Studies is who I was thinking of.
Well, the Institute for Fiscal Studies contributed to the Dilnot report around the BBC that talked about the fact we can't compare a household economy to a national economy. And they're also talking about some of the needs to make sure that we are taxing wealth. I think there's a
But
question
not,
about...
but not an annual wealth tax.
Well, we could look at Spain, we could look at Norway, Switzerland we just talked about, somewhere with lots of very wealthy people.
How much would you say that they raise on average? Is it 14 billion or is it more like 400 million?
Well, they're very different countries with different per capita. We have the City
I'm
of
just saying
London.
that nobody does what you're proposing.
Well, because no one else has the City of London than what we have. So what I'm suggesting is we're a global leader in reducing inequality. We have 1 in 3 children living in poverty. At what point do we say enough is enough and actually the super rich should be paying a little bit more to help contribute towards our public services? I'm more worried about the teachers, the nurses, the cleaners, the people who are actually keeping our country moving.
John Redwood, how do you think the Conservative Party is doing at the moment in challenging the Labour government? As we've said, the Greens are getting more members and Reform is the most popular party in the polls. Do you still feel like instinctively you're a Conservative person or are you tempted to reform?
Well, the Conservatives on this budget are the only party with a sensible policy. And the Conservatives are saying you start by reducing wasteful and needless expenditure, and then you have the opportunity to price people back into work. This government has put unemployment up in every month.
The trouble is
over
the
last
Conservative
year.
government,
We were getting
of course, led to
unemployment
the highest
down.
tax rises.
Yeah, well, they were wrong
in a
with that.
generation.
You may have noticed I didn't even vote for the budget that put the taxes up because I thought that was wrong then.
I also
and then
noticed
if you
that you
add
did-
even more taxes on top, as Rachel Reeves did last budget, that was an absolute economy killer.
I also noticed that you wrote a contribution for a Centre for Better Britain report, which is a reform-affiliated think tank. And I assumed that meant that you were, in transit, in motion.
They asked me to write a foreword for a piece of work they were doing, and they assured me they were an independent charity, and on that basis I wrote for them.
Aren't you a little bit tempted to go to reform?
No.
Doesn't sound
Not
like it
at
at all.
No, I think the Conservatives are providing a very effective opposition. I mean, they identified the Mandelson problem at exactly the right time, and that was a major win. They are leading on the attack on wokery, and that is on the turn. And now they've got exactly the right economic strategy, which is you start with their 47 billion of spending cuts, and then you can actually price people back into buying houses and into jobs. The scandal is that young people are not getting jobs now because of the jobs tax and the dreadful budget.
Let me just
say the attack on wokery is all a distraction from protecting the power and wealth of the super rich.
OK, let's have a look at the budget because we want to bring you what our viewers think. Should we tax the rich more? Yes, 70% wins the argument. No, 30%. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.